oversee the implementation of a couple of international treaties. One of them is the World Heritage Treaty, and the other is the Climate Change Treaty. This process has been going on for a number of years, and the Climate Change Treaty, by the way, is part of the Earth Summit, which was signed by President Bush, the 41st president, back in 1992. And the Biodiversity Treaty also is wrapped up in this. And there are just some new information here that's going to come out from the Department of Conservation Resources from the state of Virginia relating to all that, which interfaces with this program. Now, some of the natural heritage areas that have already moved forward from the initial stage, which is what you're in right now, and they're looking at the next stage, which is writing rules and regulations to comply with those international treaties through the National Park Service. This is one out in out west. This is Great Basin Natural Heritage Area, and it says the project will not, the heritage area is not to exceed or have significant adverse effects on or exceed the carrying capacity of historic, cultural, recreational, or environmental resources. Carrying capacity has to do with the number of people that are actually within a specific area. So there's going to be a stakeholder committee that's actually going to wind up having to look at this and determine whether or not the number of people within a specific area are endangering the environmental services for the carrying capacity of that region. Somebody's got to write that regulation, they got to establish the committee, and to determine all of the parameters that are dealing with that. Now, in addition to this, there is a fiduciary responsibility. Somebody's going to have to sign on the dotted line for all of that money, because this really creates a trust, and those trustees will have to sign on the dotted line. So whoever is involved in signing on that dotted line, I'm sure will have lots of questions from the local constituency wanting to know what is their actual legal responsibility regarding monetary aspects and the other aspects of, for instance, the carrying capacity, which if you want to go to Wikipedia and look it up, it's already on the internet. Let me go to the next slide. We only have a couple of slides. Now, this one is from one up in Connecticut, and it says they're writing a new plan. In other words, they've already had the plan that you're about to write, but this is coming now, the next plan, and this is what would be your next step as a trustee or a fiduciary officer. And it says, first, we're going to have issues that include non-traditional economic activities. Now, if you go to the internet and look up the triple bottom line, 3PL, you will find that that is the non-traditional economic assessment. So again, we're going to have a committee that's going to look at the three aspects of sustainable development, which is going to be social, economic, and environmental. Somebody's going to have to write those regulations and be responsible for the implementation and enforcement of those regulations on that non-traditional economic system. Now, we've got greenhouse gas emission regulations that's got to be written in order to comply with all this. So in Alabama, we've already had the ecotourism handbook, so to speak. The Alabama Cooperative Extension has produced a newsletter. And in that newsletter, it talks about ecotourism and the fact that we want everybody to come to Alabama, but we don't want too many people, because we don't want them to love Alabama to death, and that's actually how it's put in that cooperative extension. So if you can imagine now having lots of automobiles, bus tours, and everything else, we have to limit all that, because we now have greenhouse gas emission regulations tied to the Climate Change Treaty, which is part of Agenda 21 back in 1992. And there it goes on. Greenhouse gas emissions, and right next to it is climate change adaptation measures. Have no idea what a stakeholder committee might be able to write into that. I don't know what restrictions it's going to place on you in this area, whether it's farming or tourism, but certainly there are going to be some. Energy conservation is going to be another big issue. As a matter of fact, the ICC, International Code Council, has a set of regulations dealing with energy conservation. They're being adopted through other means. So you would just mirror what's going on in the municipality and county governments dealing with other regulations. So you'll bet you may even have a stakeholder committee that involves people from both entities. Then we have renewable energy generation, community health and wellness. Who's going to determine what that is? And when we're outside the parameters, what kind of regulation is going to be required to be written to bring that back into scope? The next one is social equity and justice. Now, if that doesn't strike at the heart of redistribution and taking your wealth determining that you have too much wealth and spreading it to other people. I don't know what does. Now, the last one is food security. And there is a food charter that Kathy will get to you that explains what food security is, because it's wrapped up into your well meter. We're going to put meters on your wells to determine whether or not you're drawing too much water from your well. A whole litany of things, all involved in the food security system that you wouldn't think would be there. So this is essentially what you're looking at in the coming years after you write your initial report and sign over this area under the federal government. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I would just like to add that all these people that you see sitting here, all we got by way of information about this heritage area was a blurb in the newspaper. That's all we got about the Sustainable Communities Grant that's going to partner HUD, the EPA, and the DOT to be writing our regulations for us in the New River Valley, and in Albemarle County, Charlottesville, and in Roanoke County. None of these people have been involved, including myself, in that process. But the thing is, we are all landowners within the boundary. This is not about 10 counties and the music venues at those locations. This is about all 19 counties. There have been a total of 10 meetings. The most well-attended meeting, public information meeting, the most well-attended meeting was 30 people in Abingdon. And the Crooked Road organization would have been talking to themselves had we not been there. This is not representative of our government. This will affect all our lives. And we plan on being involved in this issue. And we're taking this up with Morgan Griffith, because in this, there is no consent of the governed here.
That's right.
The governed cannot give their consent without any knowledge. We want to be a part of this process because there is a proven track record that this affects property rights. This is a very well-researched newsletter. Tom DeWeese was involved in the Journey Through Hallowed Ground. He fought it for 3 years for some very good reasons. So get used to looking at our faces, because we're involved. This involves our property. And we're not going away. We'd like to work with you.
That's right.
And be a part of that process.
Is the federal government responding to the National Environmental Policy Act requirements in anything they're doing in this?
Well, no, as far as I can
Environmental
determine, that NEPA is not being followed in this particular case. There's got to be a assessment made on economic, social, and environmental issues. That has to be part of the process, and that's not being done.
So, most of those things
No.
Could fall under that act.
It certainly fall under the criteria of sustainable development, which is contained in NEPA. That's correct.
The second thing, a great deal of those lead to regulations that are taken.
Oh, certainly.
And under all federal money expended, at least it's still on the books, that the Real Property Relocation Assistance Act must be complied with.
Yes.
Which means every property owner in which something's taken from must be reimbursed,
Right.
equivalent to their loss.
Well,
Those are two laws that are still in place that must be complied with for that to happen.
Well, a grant is not a grant. There is no free lunch, and anybody that is old as I am realizes that. When you accept that money, you're tying yourself to every one of those regulations right there,
Right.
just like every other natural heritage area has done already.
Amen.
And there are 49 in our country.
Okay, I'd like to just take a moment, if I may. I have written down my personal objections. I'm objecting to this because all the landowners in my county have not been directly notified. I also object because no referendum, a vote, has been offered to private property owners. I also object because the contract between the National Park Service and the managing entity, which will be the Crooked Road, a non-governmental agency, gives the National Park Service a ton of regulations attached to said contract, which will diminish the private property rights of Southwest Virginia and, of course, with county residents. Our own Virginia Declaration clearly says that there must be consent of the governed. I object because the National Historic Area designation will restrict the right to use, enjoy, and make our livelihoods in the manner which we are accustomed to on our own lands. I also object because the Crooked Road has taken taxpayer dollars in the form of grants to promote themselves and is built upon the backs of individuals that have started their businesses already. You are a non-governmental agency with limited oversight, and if this designation goes through, you stand to reap millions of taxpayers' dollars again. Okay, and I've contacted the Moose Lodge in Galax on several occasions, and they have seen no appreciable increase from the Crooked Road piggybacking their Fiddler's Convention. I also object because if the National Historic Areas were intended to have no impact, they would have no boundaries. Boundaries have consequences. Thank you.
I ask one question. Are all of your legal documents online so that everybody can look at this in a transparent way and determine, have questions about those legal documents?
I don't know the answer to that question. Are they online? They're certainly available, but I don't know if they're online. I don't think they're online.
Yes. Including signed contracts of any type? Well, if somebody accepted a grant, I surely would think that there would be a signature for that amount of money somewhere.
There's a feasibility study is really the only formal document. The other things online are the letters from Griffith and Warner, and just information about national heritage areas. Most of that information that was presented at the public meetings.
So the county commissioners were notified in all of this that this is going on, and that letter would be online, is that correct?
The publications for the 12 public meetings that were held were publicly noticed, and
so there was no notice sent to the county commissioners involved in this area?
that's correct. Not directly to counties. Now, many of them probably got it because all of what we email out goes to, as you can see, town and city managers and so forth. So
okay.
That's 15 minutes. You all did a good job. We heard you. Appreciate you coming. We're going to carry on with our meeting. We've got a bunch of things to talk about.